Hey, everybody. Welcome to Odd and Untold, the podcast where we talk about all things strange and spooky. And joining me once again this week from the highlands of the English countryside in his spooky manner, the real reason why you should stay off the moors, my
Stay off the
buddy John.
moors.
Stay off the moors. Brother, thank you for coming back on again, man.
Thank you for having me on again.
No, of
Best
course.
advice ever. Stay off the moors.
Stay off the moors.
Stay off the moors.
Stay off the moors. So, yeah, I had to ask you back on because I'm getting a lot of feedback about our episodes together. People seem to like them. People I know, but also people I don't know. A recent comment on one of my our Halloween watch list.
Oh,
This is from a Sparkly on YouTube. I love this guest the most. John is really easy to listen to, and you can tell he and the host Jason, me, have been friends for a long time. Would love to see more with John. So, Sparkly, here you go. You're seeing more with John. So,
that is fantastic. Thank you so much. That makes me feel very special. It's nice to have people like what you're interested in, because that's kind of hard to find sometimes, especially the things that we're into. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of people, but sometimes it's not so easy to find them. So it's nice when someone appreciates what it is that you're interested in and what you do. So thank you.
yeah, and I would hope after 35 years or so, you and I would have a good chemistry at this point.
Yeah, you would think, right?
You would
You
think.
know,
We were always just the two weird guys in high school, those two guys. People would
yeah,
snicker at
no,
us, and
we're just those two guys in grown up life. So,
yeah, yeah, we still are.
and no one's ever heard us play. If they heard us play, we have wicked chemistry there too.
Yeah, people always play music. We should clarify.
Oh,
Yeah,
yes, that's what I was talking about. Playing music.
yes, we got to clarify. That's what we're talking about, not
Yes.
playing other things.
No, not
Uh,
anything else. Not anything else.
Playing music. We were in a band together for many years in high school, college, post college, and people
Good
often ask me
times.
like, why don't you like form another band? And I'm like, because it has to be John. Like, I don't know if I could play with another bass player. Um, because you and I just always had that synergy. Like we just knew where the other one was going and what to do, and we had our
Yeah,
disagreements at times, but for the most part, I mean,
sure.
you could play something and I could follow along, and vice versa, and just without even speaking, it was just we had that kismet
Yeah, I
musically.
mean, it was really special. I would love to play again. It's just a matter of time, and we're always a member short, no matter what we do. I've played
Yeah,
the drums. I've been the bass player. I would rather be the bass player, because then I'm playing more directly off of you, and that was always more fun than just keeping time as the drummer, which is fun in its own way, but not quite the same.
yeah, we played with Ethan for a while. Ethan, who was on the show, he did the
Oh
Cat
yeah,
Squatch episode, but
yeah.
and
Ethan's
he's
a great
great,
guy, great musician.
extremely
He,
talented, far more talented than we are.
he's as far as I'm concerned, still a part of the band, even though we haven't played together in like I don't know 5, 6 years at this point.
Yeah, yeah, but yeah, I mean, it was just you on drums was weird for me because just for so many years it was you were bass, I was guitar, and the drummers kind of rotated in and out, kind of
Yeah,
Spinal Tapish,
as they do, right?
as they do. That one we lost in the bizarre gardening accident.
Yeah, that
Uh,
was very strange.
Very strange, but
Spontaneous combustion.
spontaneous
That was
combustion.
that was something to experience. Hell of a finale, though.
Yes, yes, but yeah, drummers are tough to find. Um,
Yeah, that's why I became one. That's
yeah,
the only reason I became one.
yeah. Because yeah, I don't think either Ethan and I could play drums as talented as Ethan is. He doesn't play
He's a
drums,
very
right?
talented guy. No, he does a little bit, but his focus was it kept on changing from bass to guitar to singing to like guitar and singing
Yeah,
and songwriting, and he's great at that. So I think if we had stayed together uh, in the same part of the country, he would have started singing and playing guitar, and you could have played bass. I think that was always one of the coolest things about our group was that we switched instruments just all the time.
oh yeah,
You would play bass. I loved when you played bass. I always thought that you were a better bass player than me.
Well, I
and you're
didn't have to
certainly a
sing
better
at the same
guitar
time,
player.
so
Yeah, it gets complicated. So it was always fun, and I think with him in the group, we just would have continued to do that, and it would have been fun.
yeah.
But
But
he's in Pennsylvania, so who knows? He's
yeah,
moved.
yeah,
He's
we gotta
back
try
on
to
this side of the states,
yeah,
sort of.
our time zone again.
Yeah, at least, right?
Yeah,
So who knows?
yeah,
So
definitely.
hello to Ethan
Yes,
if he's
Ethan.
watching. Great guy, great guy.
Yeah, he likes a lot of my stuff on Instagram, so I do hope he watches the shows and especially the ones that you're on. So
Yeah, I mean, I saw his episode. I thought he was great. It's like, yep, that's my friend. That's my bandmate. Great guy.
he
Great
was an
guy.
awesome guest. I love talking to him. He was just so cool.
Yeah, great guest.
Yeah,
He's good. He's like one of those guys. He's just good at everything that he does.
yeah, yeah, basically.
Even if he doesn't know how to do something, like he was repairing motorcycles and he just was watching a bunch of YouTube videos. That's how he learned. And then he was just fixing motorcycles. This guy's amazing. I could never do that.
Yeah. I'm still trying to learn how to play an F chord. So
That F man, switching to the F. I hear you. That's why I stuck with the bass.
D seventh? What is that?
Yeah, God, who knows?
Who knows? Just play the power chord.
Sustain chords? What?
Sustained.
No, no. Mustaine. There you go.
Dave. Um,
God
all
bless
right.
him.
So yeah, so I guess we should move on to the parent. The reason why people are here, not to hear us
Right.
reminisce about our musical prowess or lack thereof.
Yeah,
Uh,
right.
yeah, so we're revisiting a Brooklyn location that we've talked about before, where John lived for many years in an apartment building in Brooklyn owned by my family, but he had some experiences there, which we've talked about on the podcast before. Which episodes were those again? Episode.
It was episode 7, Shadow Person in Brooklyn,
Mhm.
and episode 24, The Haunted Doll.
Right.
And
Um,
both of those experiences occurred at that Brooklyn apartment.
right. And that had 6 apartments in it. It was a building owned by my family. And we'll get into that a little bit more later. But I think those 2 experiences that we've already spoken about, those were probably the more, I want to say, like blatant or obvious experiences. I mean, the paranormal is
Yeah,
often very
I'd say
subtle,
so.
and we've
Right.
talked about that. It's a sound, a footstep, a fleeting thing that you kind of like, what was that? So those experiences were much more lengthy and prolonged, visuals and audio and stuff that you were hearing and animals reacting. If anybody wants to check those out, I'll link to them in the description below. But we're going to talk about a few more stories tonight. I have a few of my own from that building, or not even necessarily of my own, but some family members who have told me some stuff over the years. But I'll turn it over to you first, so you can tell us some of your stories, some of the other stuff that happened to you there, which was a little bit more subtle, but disturbing nonetheless.
Yeah. Okay. So, in the one that you referenced, episode 7, The Shadow Person in Brooklyn, that was the first time that I had actually seen anything supernatural, I guess. I mean, it was just so unsettling seeing that right outside my window. And it was a brand new apartment. I think it's one thing if you've been living in a place for a while and you're comfortable, you feel safe. But I had just moved into that apartment, I think, um, the month before. So I hadn't been there very long. Um, and so it just added to the general feeling of being unsettled. And I saw that was only sight that I saw. And then the experience with the haunted doll that I talked about in episode 24, that was hearing. And that wasn't just me, that was my 2 pets, that was my girlfriend at the time. So we all heard something that was very strange. Now, this next set has to do with touch. It's like I think we're in that apartment, you have to run the gamut of all the different senses. So I'll just get to it. Um, Back in 2013, I was sitting in the living room doing some work on my computer. I was sitting at this very table that I still have, working on my computer. I don't remember what I was doing. Probably something to do with one of my screenplays or something. Who knows? And my daughter was sitting across from me. She was sitting on the couch, and she was basically, I was sitting like this. She was sitting adjacent to me, kind of looking out the window. So we weren't looking at each other at all. At some point, she says, "Ow." And I looked over and I'm like, "What happened?" She's like, "Why did you pull my hair?" And nobody was in the apartment. We had no pets. It was just me. I mean, nobody else. It was just me and my daughter. And she told me that somebody pulled her hair. And I was like, that wasn't me. And I immediately thought of stories that you had told me. So I'll switch over to you for a second, then I'll finish up.
Yeah, it's one of those things, and again, we've mentioned this on the show before that we kind of like most of our experiences have happened at
Right.
like very the same locations. It's either been at my apartment on 68th Street or this
Or
apartment
my
in the
apartment.
Brooklyn
Right.
house, which wasn't far from the one on 86th Street, but
Right.
on 68th
One
Street,
or the
whatever.
other. Right.
Yeah,
One
but
location or the other.
right. But even before you had moved in, I had family members in this apartment building who had similar touch experiences, being tapped on the shoulder or just having like the bottom of their hair just like kind of tugged,
Right.
gently and playfully, but just kind of like tugged, and they would turn around and I believe.
That's what my daughter did. She like turned around. It was to the back of her head, kind of towards the base of her skull, and she just did like a little tug.
Mhm.
Not like she was yanked because that would have been alarming for all sorts of reasons. It was just like a light little tug, like someone was like trying to get her attention or something.
Right. But
And I,
it's go ahead.
sorry,
No, go ahead.
you had told me the stories, what you're about to mention, so immediately that popped into my head. But of course, she's 3 years old. I wasn't about to tell her stories of things that have happened in that apartment building. So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, no, it's okay. But yeah, I had heard stories from, my dad, of people in the building kind of being tapped on the shoulder. And I believe my uncle, my great grandfather. I mean, I remember as a kid, my father told me the story of my great grandfather who was blind. He was down in the basement one day because he was blind, but he could, he was very well versed with getting around the building, and he was just down in the basement at one time, and he felt like a tap on his shoulder, and he was like, "Who's there?" And again, most of the apartments in the building were family. It was, my aunt, my uncle, my grandmother, my grandfather, and my father, his cousins. So my great grandfather thought maybe it was one of the kids, someone playing a joke on him.
Right,
But he was, he's a blind man, so family isn't, even if they do it, they're
right.
probably going to start giggling and laughing. And, oh, it's me, grandpa,
Yeah, at some
uh,
point.
at some point
Yeah,
you're going to kind of let your own grandfather know it was you, but
yeah.
no one ever said
Claimed
anything,
responsibility. Yeah,
right. And again, taken alone, it's not really a huge deal, but I've had cousins who've lived in the building who said the same thing. They've had like the tap on the shoulder and they turn around and
no one's
the
there.
other, I mean, no one's there, or whoever's with them is maybe like across the room, kind of like
Oh,
with your
right.
daughter. Like,
Yeah,
you know, she thought it was you, but if you're far enough away where it's like I couldn't possibly have been me.
right.
I believe it happened to
She,
my dad too. Like he was
yeah,
at my uncle's house one time and he felt a tap on the shoulder and he kind of turned around, was like, "What?" And my uncle was far away and was like, "What are you talking about?" Like, I didn't touch you. So it's just
right.
like a recurring theme in that building where people who live there, and again, I've had some cousins who've lived there, either grew up there or just lived there temporarily. I think even in the apartment that you were in just before you got there,
Yeah,
lived there for a couple of years and saw things and felt taps on the shoulder or the tug of the hair, like you said, this sort of tactile paranormal experience of just being touched, tapped or tugged or so it's again like one story taken alone, you can kind of throw that out, but when you hear that like people over the years, different people over the years have experienced this, it's interesting to me.
right. And people like my daughter, she knew your uncle, but didn't really know your uncle, and like your uncle would not tell her these stories about,
Now,
or your dad, or anybody, because she's a little girl. So she was about 6 feet away from me when that happened, clearly out of arm's reach. And I wouldn't do that. I would not play a trick on her. It was just very strange. And it made me think immediately of those stories that you had told me. Now, there's something later that happened to me. I think it was the following year, right before I moved out. So it was 2014, probably early in the year. Oh no, it was the summer right before I moved out. That's right, right before I moved out. And I was sleeping. Uh, my wife was home. My daughter was home. They were both sleeping. I woke up. It was starting to get warm, and I was thirsty. So I just went to the kitchen. I didn't turn on any lights because I didn't want to wake either my daughter or my wife up. So I just walked to the kitchen, opened up the fridge, poured myself some water, had some water, cooled off a bit. I put the glass down. And it was, like I said, it was starting to get warm, so I wasn't wearing a shirt. And then I actually felt something on me. It was as if a thumb and an index finger started to tickle me right underneath my armpit. Like someone was trying to tickle me, and I felt it, like this touch that somebody was clearly going back and forth, opening and closing their thumb and index finger right at that spot. And I like, what? And I was clearly awake, by the way. I got up, I walked to the kitchen, everything. There was enough light in the kitchen for me to see. Obviously, nobody was there, and I knew that my wife and my daughter were in their beds, you know. So I turned on the light just to make sure nobody was there. We didn't have any pets at this time. There were no insects. It wasn't like it was a butterfly flying around at night, fluttering its wings. I mean, I can't even imagine something producing that except like a human hand that was doing it intentionally, but um obviously that was not the case. So that also made me think of the hair little tug that you mentioned, but also the tapping on the shoulder, which never happened to any of us, never happened to me until something similar happened, not quite the same thing. So at this point, now in the apartment, I had seen something, I heard something, and now something had touched my daughter and something touched me. And it was shortly thereafter that we moved out. Not because of all of these things, but life happens and you move on. So
Yeah, and it's an older building. I think it was built in 1928. So not
pre-war, that's how they say it.
pre-war. Yeah,
Pre-war.
pre-war.
Yeah.
But it's one of those buildings that just a lot of people have had experiences in, and it's easy to kind of chalk it up and say, oh, well, your family's just into the paranormal and all this stuff, and they're really not. Like I'm more the anomaly, whereas I'm like really into this stuff, and other people in my family have stories. I think like most people do. Again, it's why I kind of started this podcast, because I think when people find out that you're into this stuff, everyone seems to have a story of
Yeah,
something.
there
I mean, and it could be a very little something, it could be very subtle something, or it could be something bigger. But if people are pressed hard enough and people are not afraid to share, if they know that you're open to it,
yeah,
they'll, oh yeah, something did happen to me once. So it's not like my family is 24/7 paranormal. I'm kind of that anomaly. Like my brothers are not into this stuff like I am.
right,
They have their own interests. My parents, my grandparents,
right.
most of my family, they just kind of cock their head at me and Jason, Jason's the weirdo, and of course he's into the paranormal because he's into all sorts of weird stuff. And so it's not that my family is just constantly looking for ghosts or UFOs or and any of the weird stuff. It's just one of those things that, again, when you get people talking, and yeah, I feel like something tapped me, and someone else's, yeah, that kind of happened to me too. And people just get
Yeah,
talking, and then you start hearing these stories, and uh they just kind of get propagated throughout the family, and weird stuff has happened. And uh yeah, I mean, this particular building, as well as 68th Street, where I grew up, that building just had a lot of weird stuff happen to me, to you, to other people. um so yeah, and there were some other weird things that happened in that building. uh, I'm hoping to get my dad on to talk about some stuff, because he knows these stories much better than I do.
yeah, that would
um
be awesome.
but yeah, I can share two other stories that are just weird.
Yeah,
uh and I'll tie this back into whose ghost I believe this might be.
right.
um My uncle's a musician, very, talented musician as well. Kind of like Ethan,
Super
he
talented.
super
Yeah,
talented. I mean, he could just pick up any instrument, piano, drums, guitar, whatever. Like he could just pick it up
whatever.
and wail on it.
Great musician.
So years ago, he was, and forgive me if I get this story wrong, anyone who's listening, but I'm just kind of going, paraphrasing here, and I'm giving a very uh, condensed version of the story. But my uncle was a musician, and there was one time he was recording himself playing drums. He's recording a song, and if you're doing this by yourself, you're recording track by track. You record the drums, then you go back later and you overdub the bass on top of that, then you go back and put guitar. So he was recording the drums, and the way you record drums is you put microphones around the key points of the drum set to capture the sound. Obviously, you can't just play, when we recorded our albums, we just, our bass and guitar just go direct into the board. And,
Yeah,
if you want to do that and get a dry signal, you can do that when you're recording in an apartment and your grandparents don't want to hear your heavy metal music.
yeah, necessary when you're recording in an apartment.
Yeah. But so he's recording his drums. So, obviously he's on the old reel to reel. So he goes over
Magnetic tape.
magnetic tape.
Yep.
So he goes and presses record, and then he's got to walk around, sit down at his drum set, pick up the sticks. He plays his song 2 or 3 minutes. He finishes, he gets up, he's got to walk back to the recorder and press stop. I guess upon playback, into one of the microphones near the drum set, he hears hello, like right into the microphone. And he's the only one down there in the basement. It's just him.
Right.
Probably a weekend, Saturday afternoon or Sunday afternoon. He's just, recording because he's a musician. And I guess he played it for my aunt. And my aunt said that the voice sounded very much like her grandfather. So my great grandfather.
Right.
Who was known to be a bit of a trickster or prankster. He just kind of had that personality where he would, pinch people or tap them on the shoulder when, kind of do the thing,
Yeah. There you go.
or tug their hair.
Hmm.
So there you go. So there was a lot of thought that maybe these experiences, and I'll get to another one as well, they thought it was maybe him. And another weird thing that would happen in the building is every Christmas we would have Christmas dinner in the basement in the same room where my uncle would record, but they would set up like this big long, table, and everybody would sit down there and have a big turkey dinner. And every year at like 1 p.m., the doorbell would ring. And this went on for years, from what I understand. The doorbell would ring, and every time they go out there, there's nobody there. So just the doorbell rings, nobody's there. And this went on for years, from what I understand. And once my great grandfather died, so my great grandfather's son, once he died, that stopped. The doorbell didn't ring anymore. And he was the one who was blind, my great grandfather. So just another weird thing. And again, you can kind of try to explain it with pranksters or, but I can't imagine somebody just every Christmas remembering I'm going to go to this particular building and ring this particular doorbell and then run.
That, yeah, for Ding Dong Ditch, that is a sick prankster. I mean, sick commitment every Christmas at 1 p.m. for like a decade. Man, that
Yeah,
is a
I'm not even
commitment.
sure how long it went on for, but from what I understand,
Yeah,
it was years, and it was just every year the bell would ring,
yeah. Now
and
I remember I can verify these stories because you told me immediately. You knew me, and you told me about the hello that your uncle heard, and we had been we were sort of talking about the band because we were reminiscing a little bit. Your uncle was the first person to record us
yeah,
at that Brooklyn location, on those very drums, same microphones, all of those things. Those were the first 4 or 5 songs, the place where he recorded those songs. So I was very familiar with that. And then you told me that story. I'm like, oh my God, that is that's crazy. And as it was happening, you told me the stories about the ringing bells. So this isn't, I mean, this goes back decades where I have been familiar with these stories because you told me right after they occurred.
yeah, and the thing about the microphone, like, I mean, in this day and age, everyone's familiar with EVP and ghost hunters on TV, and is there anybody here with us? Give us a sign, and something
Yeah,
apparently speaks into the microphone. This was like, I mean, you're probably going back into early '80s, maybe late '70s,
yeah,
when this occurred. And it's not like people were doing this at that point of leaving microphones open and asking questions. And he wasn't even trying to do that. He was just trying to record, a
Right.
drum track. Um, so it was one of those things that even when I first heard the story, I didn't have a name for it. I was like, oh, he caught an EVP. I was just like, oh, that's weird.
Yeah.
He caught this voice, this like kind of disembodied voice on tape. So yeah, and like again, we've known each other 35 some odd years, and uh these stories from very early on, either from me telling you or my dad telling us. They're just kind of part of our lore,
Yeah.
and stuff we heard for years. And so it is interesting, that it happened, certain some of these things happened to you as well, as far as being touched.
Yeah. I mean, like you were saying, I knew the stories, but nothing had ever happened to me. That first experience with the shadow person, I want to say that was 1999. And I worked it out when I actually, before I did the show, I worked out when it is, but I can't recall exactly. So from 1999 up until 2013, no one else had, as far as I know, experienced anything in that apartment. Um, I mean, in my present family, actually, I have to correct that. And then something happened to me the following year. So there was long stretches of time where nothing happened. The middle story about the haunted doll that actually did occur. Again, I should have reviewed my notes. Um, but basically, what I'm trying to say is, over the course of 15 years, have happened. These experiences have happened to me or people who were living with me at the time. So it's not like they happened very quickly. I mean, they're very spread out. And then you add the stories of things that have been going on in that apartment or in the entire building with your family. That stretches back a whole more decades than I'm even aware of.
Yeah, and that's another thing that I want to like point out to people, is that if anyone's listening and saying, oh, like you guys just have these consistent stories and just all this stuff happens to you, and it's like, no, like we have a handful of stories that happened over decades. It's
Yeah,
not, we're not talking that something happened every night. And you hear people who will say, oh yeah, every night I hear the footsteps upstairs, or and for us it was not a daily thing or a monthly thing or even a yearly thing. It was something that would
no,
happen, and then nothing would happen again for
then
two,
nothing.
3, 4 years. And
Yeah.
like you're saying, like you have 4 or 5 experiences in this apartment over 15 years.
Hmm.
That's not a lot when you think about just living there day in and day out and day in and day out. And, for the most part, nothing's happening. You just kind of have these little isolated incidents. And again, like a tug of the hair or a tickle under the arm or seeing a shadow person one night. That's not like you're saying, oh yeah, he's there every night. And, every night this shadow person is looking in my window. And it wasn't that, it's you live there
Yeah.
for 15 years or so, and you had a handful of experiences. Same with me at 68th Street. It seems like a lot, but I lived there since I was 8.
Hmm.
And most of those experiences happened between the time I was 8 and, God, when did I move out? I was 26. So you're talking
That's a long. That's a long span of time.
right. So again, to have 5 or 6 stories over the span of nearly 20 years, it's really not that much when you think about it. You spend that much time in a place, 15 years, 20 years. Some people, they live in an apartment for 2 years, their lease is up and they move on. Um,
Right.
but we spent large swaths of our lives in these places. So it's not really that unusual if you think about it, to have this many experiences.
Yeah. So I just worked it out. From the first experience, it was 1999 to the last one, 2014. So from the very first year that I moved in to the very last year that I lived there was 4 experiences over the course of 15 years.
Right. So not a heck of a lot. It's not something
Right.
that's going on every single night or, on a
No, no.
regular recurring basis.
If it were going on every single night, I wouldn't know about it because I would have moved out and not known that it was going on every night.
Yeah.
I'm not seeing that thing in my window. Sorry, creature, whatever it is that I
Entity.
saw, entity, whatever. I don't know what it was. I'm not seeing that in my window every single night. I'm just not. I would not put up with that. That's not on the lease.
Yeah.
You will have to share.
You have to share with
No,
this.
no, I'm out. No, thank you.
Uh, yeah.
Yeah,
So
so
just
four over the course of 15 years. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And trying to think of what else. I mean, there was one other story I can tell of that bill because again, I didn't live there, so most of my stories about that place are secondhand stories from other family members.
But I have to tell you, we said this right before we started recording too. The way that you talk about the Brooklyn apartment where your family and I lived is kind of like the way that I talk about 68th Street. Like just this feeling of dread that we both have with these places. And I think with the Brooklyn apartment where I lived, it was a little bit easier because I actually lived there. I think that the same is true for you because you lived at 68th Street.
Right,
So in part, it is your home. It's
right.
supposed to be safe, even if it's strange,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. But there was one year, right as I got into ghost hunting, I bought some equipment. I got like these audio recorders, and we were having Christmas. I think I got the recorder for Christmas actually, but we used to do Christmas Day in that basement where
Right.
my uncle recorded. And again, the front of the basement was all storage bins and areas, like the old coal bins that people would sort of separate into storage areas.
Hmm.
And then the back was more of like uh, I forget what they called it, the rumpus room, I think they called it, but it was just kind of like it was carpeted. It had a piano, it had some recliners in there. It was just like old furniture, and my uncle's recording equipment was in there. But they would set up this long like dining room table, and everybody would come for Christmas, and we'd all sit down there. So I had set up my recorder at the front of the basement where all the storage bins were. So I figured most
Hmm.
people aren't going to be out there, and if we do hear stuff, it's going to be muffled, distant, voices from the back of the basement. I mean, it's a big building, it's a big basement. So
Yeah.
uh, I set up the recorder and I listened back to it. And of course, we didn't hear anything really except the muffled voices, people going up and down the stairs. But at one point later in the night, there was this very loud metallic thud that we could hear very close to the recorder. Like you could tell everything else was kind of distant. You just hear the muffled voices in the background. You could hear walking in the background, but very muffled.
Yeah.
This was like right near the recorders. Boom. And, oh, what was that? That was weird, but again, we had nothing to really go on. And I guess later that night or the next day, my uncle called my dad and he's like, "Hey, we found my great grandfather's shillelagh. He had like an Irish walking stick, shillelagh." And I guess they had been looking for it for years, ever since he died. And he died, I want to say 1988 or 89.
Hmm.
And this is probably 2005, 2006. It was like right before I joined like an official ghost hunting group. So probably like Christmas of 2005, because I think 2006 when I joined the group. So he had been dead for a long time at this point, and they had been looking for this shillelagh for years. They couldn't find it. And my uncle says, "Yeah, we found it." And it was like right out up against this metal cabinet, right by where I had the recorder.
Yeah.
So it was just a weird thing to I mean, they'd combed that basement numerous times. They had pulled stuff out to set up for Christmas. They were putting stuff away, and then they just found the shillelagh. And nobody saw it when they were, bringing stuff out. Uh, and that's something that they would have because it was something important to them. Like it wasn't just,
Right.
oh, here's like an old umbrella or something that they just like
Right.
if they were moving stuff out and picked this up. I mean, a shillelagh is not just a cane; it's kind of this gnarled Irish walking stick, and
Yeah.
uh, but they found it, and it was just laying up against this cabinet, almost like it had fallen. Boom. And again, I don't know if that's what we caught on the audio, but it was just interesting that we caught like a bang on the audio, and then this thing was leaning up against the metallic cabinet. So make of that what you will, but I can't see
Yeah.
anybody finding this shillelagh and just forgetting to mention it all of Christmas and then be like, oh, there it is.
Yeah. And it was famous. I mean, even when I started first coming over to your house when we were in high school, they would talk about it. I mean, it was not like you say, like a discarded umbrella. That's like, oh, look at this old umbrella. I mean, it was a famous thing that they would always mention in one way, shape, or form.
Yeah, so family heirloom,
Yeah,
something that, and again, when you're looking for something like that, you're hyper focused on it. It's not just a broom. It's not just a mundane sort of thing that you keep in the house that you move and you kind of absentmindedly forget that you did it. I mean, we do that all the time. We come home from work, you take your keys and you throw them somewhere,
right.
and then 2 hours later, you're like, man, where do I put my keys? Because they're a part of your daily life. They're mundane. They're not. I
Yeah,
mean, you need them, but they're not like sentimental to you. They're not like, oh my god, if I lose this, um, I'll be devastated. Go and get more keys or whatever. But this was something that they had been looking for, and it meant something to them. It wasn't just another broom or like I said, an umbrella. It meant something. So for
yeah.
them to find it was really cool, but a little odd that it just was like there, just out in
And
the open.
that it was preceded by the sound that you recorded a sound of that thud. That is very strange.
Right. And again, I have no proof that the two are
Yeah,
connected. It's just
right.
weird that nobody was going near the recorder. And again, these recorders were very sensitive. If somebody was approaching it, you'd kind of hear the footsteps. I mean, it was a
Footsteps. Yeah,
cement, kind of like not laminated, but like a painted cement floor. Like you would hear
yeah,
somebody walking near it. You would hear motion, maybe voices. I mean, most people didn't even know it was there. I think it was me, my dad, and my uncle who knew it was there. I don't think anybody else even knew it was there. So it's not like somebody was like, oh, let's go check out Jason's thing and
yeah.
play a prank on him. Like nobody even knew it was there.
Right.
I just kind of, I mean, the thing was, it's tiny. It's like a little people, kids would take it to college, record lectures. It was a tiny little recorder,
Yeah.
so digital, no tape, and tiny little thing. Um, so yeah, nobody even knew I had put it there besides my dad and my uncle, maybe. So it's not like cousins or other kids would go up there and try to scare me or hoax me or whatever. So again, I don't know that they are connected, but it's a weird correlation that you have this bang, this metallic bang. It sounded like somebody took a piece of wood and banged on the metal cabinet, and then here's this wooden shillelagh leaning up against a metal cabinet. So again, make of it what you will. Um,
Yeah, a lot of these things are, like you always say, we're not claiming that they're anything. They're just odd. We don't know how to explain them.
right, right, yeah. So I would never say that's definitely a ghost or definite proof of the paranormal. It's just weird things that have, again, somebody could have been playing Ding Dong Ditch with us for 15 years on Christmas
Right.
Day, and
Maybe.
it's very possible. It's not out of the realm of possibility, but it's
How likely is it?
how likely is it? And either way,
Yeah.
it's just odd.
Yeah.
And just as this is odd. Like, why would this thing just show up out of nowhere? And I've heard a lot of stories like this where people will be looking for something, and you look and you look and you're looking in this drawer and you look, and then they'd wake up the next morning and it's like just sitting on the kitchen table. And it's not something that would have been out. It's not something that they would have moved. It's something that was gone for a long time. And like, oh, where did we put that? And then the next morning, it's just laying like wide out in the open, just like right there. Um, and I've heard those stories from a lot of different people.
There's
And
actually a similar story that you have about your hairbrush. Do you remember that thing?
the hairbrush. Oh my God. When I had
That
hair.
was, yeah, when we had hair, we needed hairbrushes.
Yeah.
But that
Um,
thing it went missing when you were 15 or 16, I think.
yeah. Um,
Something like that.
yeah. It was like a brown hairbrush. I used to just keep it in my back pocket. And
Yeah.
back when I had
Just
long hair,
long,
both of us,
luxurious hair.
both of us
Yeah.
had long, luxurious hair, and I would brush my
Yeah.
hair and stick it back in my pocket. And yeah, I lost it, couldn't find it. And then, yeah, like a very similar thing happened. We were like, I think we were sitting out on my front stoop one night,
Yeah.
and then we went
There it
in.
was.
There it was. It's just like someone had returned it to me, and
Yeah. Thank you for the brush. Here you go.
thank you for the brush. And again, it's not.
But years later,
Yeah, yeah,
I don't even remember it. It went missing when you were, like I said, 15 or 16. And I think we were sitting out there and we were in our early 20s. It must have been college. And there it
yeah,
was.
yep.
And I remember the look on your face when you saw it, and you're like, "What the hell is this?" Like you could not. I've never seen that look on your face because this brush had gone missing for 6 years, 7 years, and there it was
Right.
on the
And it's
porch.
right. And I mean, you remember my grandfather. My grandfather
Yes.
was a very fastidious,
Uh-huh.
neat person. Nothing would be on that stoop without him
No,
noticing. Uh,
no. Like immediately, like if you had
Immediately.
left it there that day, he would have found it and brought it up to you.
Right. It would have been on the banister. It would have been on the
Yeah.
radiator. Like it would have been somewhere. He would have rang the bell or like whatever it was.
Right.
Like I would have gotten that hairbrush the next day. If it had
Right.
fallen somewhere, like between the porch, like he was always in there sweeping leaves out.
Hmm.
There's no
I
way he would
remember
have
that.
missed this for
Yeah.
years.
No.
Like maybe a day or two, because maybe he didn't sweep the leaves on Tuesday, but he would have swept those leaves on Wednesday. So like he would
Yeah.
have found it within a day or two at most, not 2 years later. And then it's just
Yeah.
sitting. And I remember like the porch had like a brick pedestal.
Hmm.
It was like a brick pedestal and then a concrete slab on top. And then there was a black metal pole that connected to the upstairs porch. And there was a flagpole attached to that. And it was
Right.
sitting on that pedestal. Like we just came
Hmm.
outside and there's this brush. And again, maybe someone in the neighborhood found my brush, held on to it for years. And then one day it was just like, yeah, it's time to give this back to Jason. I'm not going to ring his bell. I'm not going to put it in the mailbox. I'm just going to leave it right here
Oh yeah.
on the pedestal.
I don't want to bother him.
I don't want to
Right.
bother him. I think I threw the
Just put it
brush
back
away. I
there.
didn't want it back at that point because I was like, either it's been through space and time and different dimensions, and it has seen horrors,
Oh
the likes of which I would not want to see, or
no,
some
man.
weirdo held onto my brush for 2 years and was doing God knows what with it. But I was like,
Yeah, I
either
mean,
way,
I
I
don't
don't.
know. I don't know what's worse.
Yeah, exactly.
You
I
know?
think I'd
So
prefer the weird alternate dimensions that it traveled through.
yeah, that would be the better explanation, the more
Yeah,
comforting explanation.
but either way, I didn't want it, so I tossed it.
Yeah.
But it was just it was weird that yeah, it's just like the brush is just sitting there one day. Again, I'm not saying it's paranormal, but
Who knows what it
who
was?
knows why it disappeared for 2 years and then was just on my stoop one day. It didn't
Yeah.
disappear for 10 minutes. It wasn't like, where did I put my brush? Did I leave it outside? Like years went by and then it's like, oh,
Years. That's very strange.
yeah, I think at that point I'd even cut my hair. Like I still had
Yeah.
hair, but it wasn't
Right.
the long hair anymore. But I didn't
Right.
need the brush as much anymore. But like I said, I was like, I'm not keeping this. It's been in someone or something's possession for 2 or 3 years now, and I don't want it back.
Yeah. Best to let it go.
Best to let it go.
And again,
Uh,
that was 68th Street.
that was 68th
So
Street. Yes, not the other apartment building.
right. So, but the majority of things that have happened to us, whatever it is, one of those two locations.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I wanted to mention too, is I've lived in other places as well. Like I moved to Staten Island with my first wife. Nothing ever happened in that house.
Right.
I was there for years. Nothing ever happened. Then I moved back to the 68th Street house. A few things happened. Moved back out with my second wife to Staten Island. Nothing really happened in that house. I mean, it was an old house. It was built in 1917. A few little subtle things would happen. Nothing I could
Mhm.
really say was like definitely weird. I mean, you'd hear things sometimes, but you could always just chalk it up to the neighbors or the house settling.
Yeah.
But nothing that I would bring really to the podcast. Uh, and now I'm in this apartment and nothing has happened here. It's just 68th Street for me was that focal point where like a lot of stuff happened, and then anywhere else I've ever lived, nothing happened, and lived there for years. I lived on Drake Avenue for 5 6 years, and like nothing
Yeah.
nothing happened. Every now and then you kind of like, did I just hear a voice? But like not even enough really to, like I said, to bring it to the podcast. Just little things that make you cock your head, but nothing like what I experienced elsewhere. And same for you. Like
Yeah.
this Brooklyn apartment that you were in that my family owned, you had a lot of, a lot, four or five experiences over 15 years.
Yeah.
And where you're living now and on the moors,
Yeah. On the Moors,
the moors,
uh, King Charles the Third was inaugurated. No, that's not the right word.
coronated.
He was coronated.
It
Yeah,
was
he was
coronation.
coronated today. So
Yes.
It's a big coronation day. It's a big celebration here in England. Even on the moors, that's what a celebration looks like on the moors.
Yeah, a little quieter, but
Yeah, a little quieter.
they're all in the pub having a drink.
Yeah, exactly. That's where I should go after this
Warning any traveling Americans coming through,
to stay off the
stay
moors.
off the moors.
I don't know if it's true, but I think that's a Sherlock Holmes origin. I know that what we're talking about is American Werewolf in London. John Landis, 1981. But staying off the moors, I think that might be the Hound of the Baskervilles.
I believe so.
You
Yeah.
know,
I mean, it's been a while since I read that story, but yeah, that's basically where because it was on the moors,
yeah,
and I don't think there was a salty, drunken Britain there telling Americans to stay off the moors,
stay
but
off the moors.
but
No,
yeah, but the Hound of the Baskervilles was on the moors. I mean, that's where
yeah,
it
but the
roamed. It
moors,
roamed kind of the countryside and would come into
yeah.
farmhouses and manors and such.
I just think that because I just saw the Hammer Hound of the Baskervilles, which I had never seen before, with Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee, and I loved it. It's so good. So that you just made me think about it with the moors.
Yeah,
They're just outside my window here.
exactly. Um, yeah, I have to watch those because I love Sherlock Holmes. I have like a book like bigger than a
Yeah,
phone book, and it's just like every single Sherlock Holmes story that uh, Doyle wrote, and I've read it from cover to cover.
yeah.
I love the Sherlock Holmes stories, but again, I haven't read them in a long time. But they're just so good, and yeah, Peter Cushing is just the ultimate
So good.
Sherlock Holmes. I know other people say Basil Rathbone, but
Right.
I,
Yeah. Many
and
people
he
talk about him.
yeah, and he was very good as well. But
Sure.
I think Peter Cushing just looks the part. I mean, the hawk nose and
Yeah,
the skinny
exactly.
build and just like the proper Brit
Hmm.
with that little twist of sinisterness to him, but
Yeah, you're not quite sure.
you're not quite sure where
If
he
you can,
stands. And
yeah,
Sherlock, that's what Sherlock Holmes was. If you read the books, he was not the greatest fellow.
yeah.
Um, he was a drug addict, and
He
uh,
had all sorts of problems.
he had also,
Poor guy.
very egotistical and but a
And the
great
great ones,
character.
right? Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, but
So if you're listening and you've never seen The Hound of the Baskervilles with Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee, both work for the Empire, sort of, um, check it out. It's amazing.
yeah, Birth of the Empire, Christopher Lee, and kind of close to Death of the Empire with Peter Cushing. Stephen
Right.
talking.
Exactly. The whole time period.
Yeah,
Great.
yeah, Dooku to Tarkin.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I have to watch that. I haven't seen Hound of the Baskervilles with Cushing,
So good.
but he's good in everything. So
He's every single role he was ever in. He was fantastic. Sometimes people have off roles or off movies. Keanu Reeves comes to mind. I love Keanu Reeves as John Wick. My God, as Neo, but he's not always so great. Love the
no,
guy, but not always so great.
yeah, but yeah, Cushing was always great,
Cushing
and
was always great.
I want to do another episode where we talk movies because
Oh,
one
great.
one one you just saw, and we'll get into it a little bit here. The Abominable Snowman of the Himalayas, which is also a Hammer film, a very different
With Peter
Hammer film,
Cushing.
but with Peter Cushing,
Yeah,
who is fantastic in it.
so good.
Horace Tucker, who's really good. He kind of plays a like the Tom Slick character, who's an actual guy who funded Yeti research in the Himalayas and like the
Yeah,
Shipton expedition. Like he was involved in like all that stuff. And
yeah.
but just he kind of plays the brash American
American. Yeah,
what's the word I'm looking for? Just he's in it for the money.
yeah.
He wants to find Yeti for the money, and Peter Cushing is doing it more for personal reasons, and they
Yeah,
kind of strike out.
it's all about the music for him.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but just
Not
a
about the
really
fame.
yeah, but just a really good story, very very cerebral for like a movie from that time period from Hammer, which was at the time Frankenstein and mummies and Dracula and just
Yeah,
like
it is really cerebral. We have to talk about it.
yeah, I definitely want to do a more in-depth episode when we have more time about that particular film. And you had mentioned a while back when we were doing, I think, the Halloween watch list, we wanted to talk about like Christmas horror movies, which I think we did.
Yeah, no, we did that one.
And then I think we wanted to talk about just like winter, like not necessarily Christmas, but more like snow. Like I think we were mentioning like John Carpenter's The Thing.
Yeah,
And this movie was one that I was thinking of for that
yeah,
podcast episode of just like winter
absolutely.
horror movies that not necessarily tie to Christmas or New Year's
Oh yeah, no,
holiday, but
there's
just
a bunch of good ones. Yeah,
right. Um, so yeah, maybe we'll do in the winter, maybe we'll do something like that. Because this movie
sure.
is like one of the, I mean, my dad kind of got me into that habit of just like when it snows, put on the Abominable Snowman, because that
Yeah,
whole movie is just wind and snow and more wind, and wind kind of plays a part in the movie as far as what the characters hear and what they're
yeah.
experiencing. And so it's a really great movie to watch, just like on a cold, windy, wintry night,
Uh,
to just kind of
Per
get into that.
yeah, perfect for that type of weather.
Yeah.
You can't watch it when it's sunny out. Even, but if you did, it would still be good. But it's just that extra um moody element of where you actually are. It puts you
Yeah.
right in the film.
Yeah. Cause it's a very claustrophobic movie in that
Yeah,
sense. Cause it's not really
kind of
as
like the
grand.
thing too.
Right. Right. And again, I
Yeah,
think it's just part of being out in the cold and people having to huddle together, whether it's in a cave or, a research outpost. Uh, but it's just this very sort of claustrophobic, a small team of guys, and what they're experiencing. And yeah, like you can watch it in the nice weather, but I always love watching it. If you could look out the window and just see the snow and hear the wind and the snow is hitting the glass, and you're watching this movie where there's just this constant barrage of snow and footprints in the snow, and
yeah,
uh, just a really well done movie, and kind of that Steven Spielberg Jaws approach of like
mm,
not showing,
right.
just kind of alluding to the creature, or just seeing like little snippets or hearing things, and keeping the reveal to the end, which is again not something you really saw from that time period. Whereas a lot of the Hammer films were more, I mean, for the time, they were more a little grotesque and gory and frightening. Whereas this
Yeah,
movie is,
as the 60s and 70s went on with Hammer, they got bloodier and bloodier. But this
right.
one, not a hint of that. I mean, it's all psychological, which is
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. And it touches on a lot of stuff that I feel like didn't really hit Bigfoot folklore until more recently, with like telepathy and
Yeah, that is
uh,
a big part of it.
right, which is not something you'd hear in the 50s and 60s. I mean, back then it was,
No,
I saw Bigfoot, I saw something cross the road, I saw footprints.
right.
Like it was much more grounded, physical, experiential thing versus mind speak, or, this thing is kind of in my head.
Yeah,
So really ahead of its time on that. But yeah, I do want to delve into that movie
yeah,
a little bit more, and more Hammer
love it.
films. You gotta make me some recommendations, because I've seen Hammer films, but not in many, 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 many years. So I gotta revisit some of them.
Absolutely. I have in my possession right now, I think about 40 of them
Wow.
on Blu-ray because you know me, I love CDs and Blu-rays and things like that. So
Physical
I
media.
have many of them. Yeah, physical media. So yeah, and we'll talk about it. We'll watch some and then we'll do podcast. Be
Yeah,
fun.
awesome. That'd be great.
Cool.
Was there anything else that we missed that you want to touch on for this episode?
No, I don't think so. There's only a couple of other stories. I only have like two left,
Hmm.
and we'll talk about those when we talk about those. I don't think we have time now, and my headphones are actually dying.
Oh,
So
okay.
that's
Yeah,
why.
we're all right. So we can wrap it up there then.
Okay.
All right, awesome. So this was cool. More stories. As promised. There's always more.
Yep.
There's always more stuff I'm thinking about too. I'm like, oh yeah, that did happen to me. Um,
Yeah.
just odd stuff, And again, we're not making any claims here that this is paranormal or ghosts or whatever. Just odd things that have happened to us that we can't really explain, and even the rational explanations don't make that much sense when you think about it.
Right.
So odd
And now
stuff.
they are on and told.
And told. Well, that's, yeah,
Yeah.
That's why I should have
exactly.
called the podcast Odd and Told. Now they're told.
So, yeah.
Um, cool. All right, brother. Well, thank you once again for coming on. You'll make a lot of people
Thank you for
happy.
having me.
You're a favorite guest of many people.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Cool. Thank you.
All right, brother. So until next time,
All
thank
right.
you.
Take care.
All right. Take care, man.
Bye.
Bye. All right. I want to thank my friend John for coming on the podcast once again. He's always got good stories. We always have good chats, reminisce about the old times. And just cool to share those stories and different types of stories. Again, some of the stories are very auditory, some of them are stuff that he's seen or I've seen, and this is just all about touch. So really interesting and just I always find it interesting when multiple people have stories in the same location. And again, my family is not big into the paranormal. It's not something we talk about a lot at all. It's usually reserved for like around the campfire or just if it pops up in conversation naturally, but it's not something we talk about a lot. So it's not like my family is paranormally focused like I am. I'm very into that stuff, but the rest of my family, not really, but they all have had some weird experiences. If you have any weird experiences and you want to share them on the show, Jason at oddanduntold.com, shoot me an email and I will be glad to speak to you and feature you on the show. Again, if you want to come on camera, if you just want to write it out for me and I'll read it on air. Many different options. We can keep you anonymous, but love hearing these types of stories. So if you have a story, Jason at oddanuntold.com, and I will get back to you as soon as possible. I usually write back pretty quickly. So I have some people I'm talking to now. I'm hoping to get them on the air or at least get fleshed out stories from them. But yeah, if you have stories, would love to hear them. So reach out. And until next week, everybody, rock and roll. Moonlight.